What would you do if the museum you worked in had rules to keep the things inside, not out? And if each night that you worked, you learned more and more that the objects you had to protect were cursed? Hello, I'm CC, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have another scary Reddit story for you. The title for today's video is I manage a museum full of cursed objects. My boss says it's just junk from the old country, and is uploaded to the r/NoSleep subreddit by Cowboy Baby. Now, if you like today's episode, make sure to like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe, as I'm trying to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I'd love your help in doing so. Now, without further ado, the story. I work at a haunted item museum, or at least that's what the sign out front says. In reality, it's more of a tourist trap than a real museum. The place is crammed with random stuff from floor to ceiling, half of it probably from yard sales and old basements. Shelves sag under the weight of cracked dolls, tarnished mirrors, and jars of who knows what. Half the collection isn't even listed in the old ledger on my desk, and the entries that are there are written in handwriting so messy it might as well be a secret code. My job is a strange mix of tour guide, storyteller, and reluctant salesman. I lead curious visitors through the narrow aisles, spinning the histories of the so-called haunted items. Sometimes someone will make an offer, usually after a few drinks and a dare, and if the price is right, we'll let the item go. We always warn them, of course. We explain what the object is said to do, what it's done to previous owners, and how it's probably best left behind. But warnings have a way of making people more interested, not less. Most walk out clutching their authentic cursed treasure, laughing. Some come back a little less cheerful. We've got a strict no-return policy. Once an item leaves the building, it's officially your problem. You'd be surprised how many people tried to test that rule. If I had $1 for every time someone's grandma came storming back through the door, clutching a vintage doll or plushie she bought for her grandkids, I'd probably have enough to buy a real museum. They always say the same thing. It started moving on its own, or the eyes just keep following me. I just smile and point to the sign behind the counter. No refunds, no exchanges, no exceptions. If I had to count how many times that's happened, I'd run out of fingers. And honestly, we probably have an item somewhere in storage that could help with that too. My favorite case so far has to be this dad, who bought what he thought was a collectible Action Man figure. It turned out to be a cheap knockoff listed in my notebook as Veteran Man. I warned him that we weren't entirely sure what it did, but he just laughed and said his kid loved soldier toys. A few days later, he came bursting back into the shop, the doll in one hand, and his kid being dragged across the floor with the other. The kid was shouting in what I could only assume was fluent Vietnamese. That's when I decided maybe we'd finally figured out what Veteran Man actually did. Of course, there wasn't much I could do for him. I just pointed at the sign behind the counter. No refunds, no returns, no exceptions. He stood there, face bright red, before turning around and storming out of the museum. Some people just do not read the fine print. Not everything in here is some silly little trinket that makes you start speaking in Asian dialect overnight. Most of the stuff we've got probably doesn't do anything at all, just old junk with spooky stories attached to make tourists open their wallets. But every now and then, something actually works. And when it does, it's rarely harmless. If I had to guess, I'd say about half of what's in here is just dead weight, and at least a quarter of the rest could probably kill you in some creative and unpleasant way. Stuff like that is probably the main reason I want to share my experiences here. I've been the only employee for maybe 2, maybe 3 months now, and honestly, I like it that way. The guy who worked here before me disappeared one day without a word. No call, no note, nothing. I figure that's what happens when you don't follow the rules of this place, but I'll get to that later. It's a calm job, all things considered. A few tourists wander in every day, poking around, taking pictures, pretending to not be freaked out. And even when the place is empty, it never really feels that way. There's this low hum in the air, like the building itself is breathing. You start to get used to it after a while. As for my boss, I don't worry much about him. Walter only shows up once a week, always at the same time, always dressed like he's going to a funeral. That suits me fine. Gives me plenty of time to enjoy the quiet, or whatever passes for quiet in a place like this. The owner of this place is an older guy I've come to think of like a grandfather. He's the kind of man who looks like he walked straight out of an old photograph, always dressed in the same perfectly pressed black tuxedo, with a bloody red bow tie patterned like something out of a gothic dinner party. I've never seen him wear anything else. His head is completely bald, polished to a shine so bright it could probably qualify as one of the anomalies we keep on display. Despite his appearance, he's a genuinely kind man. Soft-spoken, patient, and always carrying this calm air that somehow makes the weirder parts of the museum feel a little less unsettling. I still don't know why he decided to hire me. I had zero experiences with antiquities, history, or the supernatural, but he just smiled during the interview and said, "You'll do just fine." I'm not sure if he meant the job or something else entirely. His real name is something I've never been able to pronounce. It's long, full of strange sounds that don't quite fit in my mouth, and I'm pretty sure it has something to do with whatever old country he's from. He never corrects me when I get it wrong. He just laughs that quiet, warm laugh of his. So, I started calling him Walter. He seems fine with it. Honestly, he looks like a Walter anyway. He always shows up at the end of the work week, like clockwork, carrying that same calm smile. He hands me a neat little stack of crisp bills, usually around $1,500, and tells me to keep up the good work. Sometimes, he slips in a little extra, or a lollipop, like some kind of reward for surviving another week in his madhouse. It's the kind of gesture you'd expect from a grandpa, if your grandpa happened to run a haunted museum and never seemed to age a day. He doesn't like talking about the museum much. I've tried asking him where all this stuff comes from, but he always dodges the question. Tourists have tried too. Some get bold after a few ghost stories and ask if the place is actually haunted, or if he brought everything over from somewhere specific. He just chuckles, waves a hand, and says, "It's all just junk from the old country." Then, he changes the subject before anyone can ask what country that actually is. I stop pressing after a while. Some things here are better left unexplained. Of course, this wouldn't be a proper haunted museum without a few rules to follow. Like I mentioned earlier, the first one's simple. Every morning before opening, I have to draw a straight white line across the doorstep. Nothing fancy, just one solid stroke with a piece of chalk. Walter insists on it, says it's a tradition. So, every day, I grab the old brick of chalk from the drawer and drag it across the entrance until there's a clean, even mark. I'm not really sure what it's for. Maybe it's some old superstition from the old country, or maybe it's just to keep the more superstitious tourists entertained. I've noticed a few people stop dead the second they see it, like they suddenly remember they left the oven on or something. They turn right around and leave without saying a word. Maybe the line keeps something out, or maybe it keeps something in. The next rule is about the necklace Walter gave me on my first day. He called it my protective gear. His exact words were, "Ever heard of Chernobyl? Treat this as your protective suit." I laughed at the time, but he didn't. It's a simple thing, an oval-shaped charm, white as bone, maybe made of bone for all I know. 3 lines of strange symbols are carved across it, shallow but sharp enough to catch the light. I've asked him what the markings mean, but he just smiles and says, "They keep you from becoming part of the collection." I'm not entirely sure if he's joking. Either way, I don't take it off. Not even when I leave for the night, especially not then. The third rule is probably the creepiest one, and it's about not answering anything when I'm alone. No voices, no calls, no knocks, nothing. If something makes a sound when there's nobody else in the museum, I'm supposed to ignore it completely. Walter never really explained why. He just looked at me. with that polite little smile and said, "Best not to be polite to what doesn't exist." I'm guessing some of the items here don't like being ignored and like to see if they can get a reaction. Sometimes, late at night, I'll hear faint tapping from one of the back rooms, or a whisper that sounds like it's coming from the vent. The first few times I almost called out, just out of instinct, but then I remembered the rule. Now I just keep my head down and pretend I didn't hear a thing. So far, it's worked. There are also a bunch of rules about the objects themselves, of course. Those are harder to keep straight, mostly because there are so many of them, and new ones show up more often than you'd think. That's where the old notebook comes in handy. Whoever kept it before me did a pretty good job of logging everything that enters, leaves, or somehow finds its way back here. One of the big ones in there is Rule B45, Feed the Talking Head. I call him Gordon. He sits in a glass case near the back, and you have to feed him at least once every 2 weeks. The notebook doesn't say what happens if you don't, and I don't plan on finding out. Now, Gordon will eat anything. Metal, plastic, wood, you name it, he'll grind it up like a garbage disposal. But that's where the warning comes in. Only feed him something you'd be willing to eat yourself. Nothing sharp, nothing toxic, nothing you'd find under a workbench. I usually give him a sandwich or a Snickers bar. He seems to enjoy the crunch of the peanuts. The story goes that the last kid who tried to feed him nails or springs got ripped apart from the inside not long after. Whether that's true or not, I'm not taking any chances. Gordon's got a mean bite for something without a body. D9 is the typewriter. It's an old black Remington model that still works somehow. The rule for that one is simple. Never read what it types out on its own. I've seen it start clacking by itself after closing. Keys moving like invisible fingers are at work. Once, I peeked at the paper and saw my name halfway down the page before I yanked it out and burned it. It's been pretty quiet since then. J4 is the snow globe. I like to think of it as the museum's own weather report. Shake it once gently, and the little flakes start following. Shake it twice, and a storm rolls in somewhere outside. I can only imagine what would happen if it breaks. And then there's K0. No description, no nickname, just a thick black line in the notebook. I asked Walter about it once. He just smiled, tapped the page twice with his finger, and after thinking for a minute, he just said, "Some things never leave." So yeah, that's what I do for a living. Not exactly a dream job, but it pays well enough. And honestly, it's never boring. I'm writing this down during my break, and then I should probably get back to work soon before something decides I've been gone too long. Anyways, take care out there, and if you ever stumble across a little out-of-the-way museum filled with haunted artifacts and a chalk line across the door, come say hi. Just make sure you can actually cross the line first. The end. I really like that story. I found it super interesting. It was almost like a little museum full of SCPs, in a way, if you know what that is. I think it's cool to think of how many maybe cursed or magical objects there might be out there. It's also cool to think that a lot of them are kind of non-normal, or ones that you might not hear or see in media a lot. I like the snow globe. I like the head that eats stuff. Man, would you work in a haunted museum for $1,500 a week? Now that is the question. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. I think I could do it. But I think the protagonist in this story is really smart in that they are not asking a lot of questions, and they're not poking around where they shouldn't be. I think in this situation, that's basically the best thing that you can do. I think if you truly wanted a job like this, just don't ask questions. And if you are not okay with that, this is probably not the thing for you. I think when you're in a situation like this, I haven't been in very many, of course, but if you're in a situation like this, the best thing you can do is listen and not try and find loopholes. I think that kind of transitions us great into the lesson for today's story. I myself am definitely a smart aleck, somebody who looks for a lot of loopholes in just about everything I can. I like it. I like the thought that I kind of bested somebody else, whoever wrote the rules. When I was in junior high, I had this math teacher who said that we had this math textbook, and if you did the assigned page, and then you did a few questions off of the next page, then you get, half a point of extra credit per extra question you did. So anyways, here comes to the end of the year, and I didn't have a great grade, and my friends didn't have a great grade. So basically, I stayed up all night one night, and I did the whole math book, and I got, enough extra credit that I got an A. But I went in there and I said, hey, if I did a little bit of extra credit, and my friend helped me, and my two friends were there and they helped me, could we kind of split the points for the extra credit? He said, oh yeah, that sounds good. So I turned it all in, and we all got A's. It was free. So I really enjoyed that because I kind of used the rules that he had proposed against him. But I think if this story has taught me something, and what I hope it might teach you, is sometimes the rules are there for a reason. A lot of the times the rules are there for a reason. And a lot of the times, if you stick your leg over the line, you might just step on a mine that if you would have just listened to the no trespassing, or listened to the stay 50 feet back, you wouldn't have encountered. I think sometimes we're so blinded by trying to be better or be smarter or whatever else that we don't understand that maybe the person who made the rules had good intentions in mind. Now, does that mean that all rules out there have good intentions? No. But I think what we can learn here is that sometimes they do. Sometimes the rules are there for a reason, and sometimes it's better that we don't find out why they're there. With that, please let me know what you think of that down below. Let me know if there's ever been a time when you've tried to overtake a loophole. Let me know if you got a different lesson and what you'd do differently. Would you take this job? And again, if you enjoyed today's video and you made it to this point, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate you all. I love you all. And with that, goodbye.